two men met online. Both agreed to what would happen next. Only one would walk away alive. Snow drifted softly over the rooftops of Rotenburg and Erfolde, covering the quiet town in a thin white blanket, while a light glowed from one isolated farmhouse where a man sat alone at his computer, searching for something he could never admit to anyone around him. Armin Meiwes had spent most of his life in silence inside that old house, a place filled with the heavy memories of his strict mother and the loneliness that had settled in after her death, leaving him with only his fantasies and a growing desire for a connection he could not find in the outside world. Late at night, as most of the town slept, Meiwes discovered an online community where extreme thoughts were expressed openly, and for the first time, he felt he was not entirely alone in his darkest imagination. Using the alias Frankie, he typed a message that revealed the secret he had carried for decades openly, stating that he was searching for a well-built adult man who wanted to eat something. He wrote without irony or hesitation. Most people who read the message dismissed it instantly or responded with shock or curiosity, but one message, buried between the many, seemed disturbingly genuine and would ultimately change both of their lives forever. The reply came from Bernd, an engineer from Berlin, who outwardly lived a structured, ordinary life, but silently struggled with profound emotional distress and a longing to surrender control in a way he could never explain to those around him. Brandis responded not with fear or disbelief, but with clarity and acceptance, telling Meiwes that he knew exactly what the offer meant, and that he wanted to go through with it step by step. Their communication deepened quickly as they exchanged long messages about expectations, boundaries, and consent, convincing each other that they had finally found someone who could fulfill the role the other had imagined for so long. Over time, their conversations stopped sounding hypothetical and became precise, organized planning, transforming what began as a fantasy into a detailed agreement between two adults convinced they understood the consequences. Brandis began preparing for what he believed would be the final chapter of his life by deleting messages, closing accounts, and leaving no information for friends or coworkers who might try to stop him or question his motives. On March 9, 2001, he boarded a train from Berlin to Rotenburg with a calmness that sharply contrasted with the reality of what he was traveling toward, a decision he made freely and without hesitation. He stepped off the platform where Meiwes waited for him, greeting him politely as though they were meeting for an ordinary appointment rather than a prearranged death. At the farmhouse, they shared a meal together at the kitchen table, speaking with an unusual mixture of awkwardness and familiarity, as if each were trying to pretend this was not the final night of one of their lives. The house felt frozen in time as they walked upstairs to a room Meiwes had carefully prepared, where a camera stood ready to document what would happen next, recording the event exactly as they had planned it. What happened in that room would later be described in court, but never shown publicly in full, because even seasoned investigators found the footage difficult to watch and deeply disturbing in its calm, methodical tone. By early morning, Brandis had lost his life inside the farmhouse, following every part of the agreement he had made, leaving Meiwes alone with the outcome of the plan they had both treated as meaningful and binding. In the days afterward, Meiwes attempted to continue life as if nothing unusual had taken place, returning to his job, walking his dog, and interacting politely with neighbors who had no idea what was hidden behind the farmhouse walls. He continued living in the same routines, but the silence in the house became heavier than ever, filled with the awareness of what he had done and the unsettling realization that the feeling he was searching for had not been satisfied. As months passed, the loneliness returned even stronger, pushing him back to the same online communities in search of another volunteer who might offer the connection he believed he had missed the first time. This time, however, the person who responded felt frightened by the seriousness of Meiwes' intentions and alerted authorities, providing them with enough information to trace him to the farmhouse. In December 2002, police entered the home with a warrant and discovered evidence that confirmed everything Meiwes had described online, including recordings, written notes, and remains that left no room for doubt. The arrest quickly became one of the most shocking stories in Germany, forcing the public and the legal system to confront a case unlike any seen before, one where both the killer and the victim had agreed to what took place. During the first trial in 2003, the courtroom was filled with experts, journalists, and spectators trying to understand how two adults could engage in something so extreme, and whether the law even applied in a traditional way. Psychologists explained the mental states of both men, describing loneliness, trauma, detachment, and fantasies that built upon each other until they formed a plan neither man questioned deeply enough to stop. The defense argued that Meiwes had not acted out of anger or cruelty, but had fulfilled a request made freely and repeatedly by Bernd, presenting him as a lonely man seeking connection in the most misguided way imaginable. The prosecution argued that no level of consent could ever justify the taking of a life, and that Meiwes had planned, organized, and documented the act with an intention that went far beyond fulfilling someone else's wish. The court's initial verdict shocked the country when Meiwes was convicted of manslaughter rather than murder, and sentenced to 8.5 years, a punishment many believed did not reflect the gravity of the crime. Public outrage grew rapidly, and Germany's highest court intervened, ruling that the first trial had not properly considered intent or the psychological motivations driving the act, ordering a full retrial. During the second trial in 2006, prosecutors presented evidence showing that Meiwes had begun searching for another participant shortly after Bernd's death, reinforcing their argument that this was not an isolated event but a developing pattern. The court ultimately ruled that the killing was murder, not manslaughter, emphasizing that consent could not outweigh intent, premeditation, or the irreversible nature of taking another life. Meiwes was sentenced to life in prison, a verdict that closed the legal gap exposed by the case and aligned with the public's demand for a clearer definition of responsibility. The case prompted Germany to strengthen laws surrounding homicide, consent, and exploitation, ensuring no similar act could ever be legally interpreted through the lens of mutual agreement. For criminologists, the story became a rare and unsettling study of loneliness, psychological distortion, and the dangers of online communities where reality and fantasy can blend until neither remains clear. For ethicists, it sparked debates about autonomy, vulnerability, and the limits of personal freedom when mental health plays a significant role in decision-making. For the public, it remained a chilling reminder that the darkest acts can grow not from rage or hatred, but from isolation, desperation, and the human need for connection taken to a catastrophic extreme. Today, Meiwes remains in prison, described as quiet, cooperative, and introspective, often reflecting on the act he once believed would give him the sense of belonging he had searched for since childhood. He has expressed regret, saying he misunderstood the emptiness inside him and that the act he committed did not bring the connection he imagined, leaving behind only more silence and an irreversible tragedy. Bernd is remembered not as a willing participant in horror, but as a man battling inner suffering so deep that he sought escape through a path no one else could understand. The farmhouse in Rotenburg still stands, though locals rarely mention it, preferring to let the story fade rather than become a grim landmark for outsiders seeking a glimpse of the past. Even decades later, the case continues to fascinate, disturb, and challenge, remaining one of the most unusual and unsettling crimes in modern history. It is a story about two men lost in their own worlds, whose paths crossed in a way that stands outside anything we normally associate with human behavior. A story that forced a legal system to evolve, a society to question itself, and the world to confront a crime that began not with violence, but with consent. This is the story of the Cannibal of Rotenburg. For more documentary true crime stories, follow True 10.